So this is you, a freshman, living a new experience at a college with your goals and expectations until it all starts to hit you from left and right, saying, you need to learn this, your responsibilities. Don't forget about practice, first time away from home, worried about your future, and lots of exams, don't know how to study. But don't worry, I'm Joao, I'm a senior, and I would like to share with you my experience from cognitive psychology, starting from memory and attention. So, memory is a process involved in retaining, retrieving, and using information about stimuli, images, events, ideas, any skill after original information is no longer present. There are different types of memory, being them sensory memory, which is the initial stage that holds all incoming information for seconds, short-term memory, which is where information stays in our memory for brief periods of time if we do not repeat it over and over again. And finally, we have long-term memory, which is responsible for storing information for long periods of time. Putting all the pieces together, we have the model of memory, in which an input is caught by our senses and becomes a sensory memory, which will further travel to short-term memory, where rehearsal could happen, and to travel all the way to long-term memory, this process is called encoding, whereas going back from long-term memory to short-term memory is called retrieval. We could think of a scenario where a professor is writing on the board or talking about a topic, and through our senses, we would listen and then visualize everything, and then we would see the words at the board, listen to the words that the professor is saying, and would be stored in the sensory memory. Once we start focus on the material, then the information will be stored in the short-term memory. And also, once we start taking notes, that would be known as rehearsal, where we would be repeating a stimulus over and over again, and that process will store information in the long-term memory. And then whenever we take an exam, we will retrieve the information from long-term memory into the short-term memory. The connection between short and long-term memory is very important because it's where the process of encoding and retrieval is happening. In other words, it is how we are able to store solid and long-lasting memories. A good tip for you to store solid and long-lasting memory in long-term memory would be by being aware of elaborative rehearsal, which is characterized by making connections to your previous knowledge, and then that would definitely make a better memory. The second process is known as self-reference effect, which is when we relate a word to ourselves, and then as a consequence, our memory improves. The third process, it's known as paired associated learning. It is whenever we connect a word visually in our mind. So let's say you listen to a word and then you picture an image of that word in your mind. And the last process is known as deep processing. It is whenever we pay close attention to the actual meaning of a word. Any questions so far?
No, it's all good. You can keep going.
Awesome. So as I was saying, attention and memory, they go hand in hand. So in terms of definition, attention could be seen as a mental active process where we concentrate effort on a stimulus. It could also be seen as a limited mental resource. We are always able to focus on one source of information while ignoring other ongoing messages around us, and this process is known as selective attention.
What if we want to divide our attention?
That's a good question. There are situations in which we can divide our attention, but this ability depends on the difficulty of task and how often we do it. As I just saw you looking at the butterfly, there are going to be distractions in your environment like your phone, computer, roommates, and loud dorms.
So, how do people ignore distracting stimuli?
It is all due to our processing capacity, which is the amount of information we can handle, and our perceptual load, which is related to the difficulty of a task. The easiest and well-practiced tasks would have a low perceptual load and small amount of our processing capacity. If you had a task that would take a high amount of processing capacity, then you would be less likely to be distracted and you would have no space for irrelevant stimuli to be processed. Of course, it would all depend on how powerful the irrelevant stimuli is. So to recap, we went over memory and its meaning, the different types of memory and how they connect with each other, as well as a few processes that can help you to study and do well on exams. Along with all that, we also covered attention and its different types. We also went over distractions and how people avoid distracting stimuli.
Well, thank you, Joel. It was very helpful.
Yeah, not a problem.